Intan, unmute Intan. Tak dengar.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. Now boleh kan?
Yes.
Alright. Okay, I hope it doesn't disturb. Okay, very good afternoon, namely to the respected Dean and my respected Dean and fellow colleague Prof. Shukran. I hope he's around. The head of Department of Psychology, Dr. Jusmawati Fauzaman. My respected guest, Dr. Khairul Husaini bin Jamil from the Department of Quran and Sunnah. And my colleague, Dr. Mariam Adawiyah Zulkifli, members of the department, and brothers and sisters in Islam. Okay, Alhamdulillah, indeed, all thanks to Allah for enabling us to make time to attend this session. So before we proceed, in the hope of getting Allah's blessings, let's all recite the Fatiha. A'udzubillahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Rahmanirrahim. Maliki yaumiddin. Okay, I will add a simple dua that I normally recite before my classes. Oh Allah, please bless this gathering of knowledge and learning experience about the soul. May the knowledge that we gain help us to become a better Muslim as a mu'min and bring benefits to the deen. Also, may the knowledge help us to become excellent followers of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amin. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Okay, now I would like to invite Dr. Jusmawati as the head of department to give a welcoming remark. Please welcome Dr. Jusmawati.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Intan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected guests of today's discussion, Dr. Khairul Husaini and Dr. Mariam Adawiyah, my respected and esteemed colleagues of the Department of Psychology, as well as students. I'm so glad actually looking at the names. Somehow our students are somehow showing interest to be involved in this effort. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Intan, for your effort. Dr. Intan representing the IOK, the Departmental IOK Committee, Islamization of Knowledge Committee, for your effort to organize this. Thank you so much. The department is appreciative of this effort. And thank you as well for the guest for agreeing to be involved in this discussion. So I hope in the future, the department will definitely organize more similar talk and similar discussion just to foster or show our support to the effort of Islamization of knowledge in the university. Okay, so I hope we will benefit from the discussion today. And again, I would like to welcome all of you to this discussion. Hopefully, we will be granted with greater or more in-depth understanding of what we are supposed to do, introducing or understanding human conception from the Islamic point of view. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you so much. Back to you, Intan.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jusmawati, for that kind remark. All right. Okay, so basically the discussion today is based on an article entitled Toward a Framework for Islamic Psychology and Psychotherapy and Islamic Model of the Soul, written by Abdallah, Rothman and Adrian Coyle, published in 2018. All right. I just want to say a bit why I chose this topic. All right. It is all right. So to me, when we talk about soul and psychology, right, it is very important that we have the combination of the spiritual and the psychology. And what brings to mind is the importance of soul in terms of our behavior is that we want to remember that the first thing that we hear and the last word that we should be saying as a Muslim is the Shahada. Another thing is plus the Salat is about us remembering Allah, and so that links us to the soul. Okay, and the Salat is about glorifying Allah. Psychology considers this the spiritual aspect, but from Islamic point of view, it's considered the soul. Okay, so we my intention is more of a practical reason. So I do see that we need to have a merge between the Islamic concepts and the psychology concepts. I must say that this session does not guarantee answers to all questions. I think this is a big topic for us to really have an answer, right? But I'm hoping that it breeds new questions so that they can guide the research effort in this area. And we just have like 1 hour plus to discuss this. So what we'll do is we'll just set this discussion what we can within the time set. Right. Another thing that I want to relate to is the choice of having Dr. Mariam as a speaker. Yeah, it's basically because if we reflect, our behavior is really based on the thoughts, right? And the thoughts is discussed in psychology under the topic of cognitive psychology. If we just look at the condition, it seems like very simple, it's a thought, but through our experience, we know that thought is not a simple process, right? So what I've done is I have suggested 4 questions to be answered in this session, which are, in opinion, how well does the framework proposed by the article, how does the framework describe the soul? How does it explain the way we govern our behaviors? How can this framework act as a framework for mental health? And how should it guide research on human behaviors? Okay, so before we go to the speakers, I just like to introduce them. So from the Department of Quran Sunnah is Dr. Hairul Husaini. Dr. Hairul Husaini bin Jami is an assistant professor of Islamic scriptural sciences, that is tafsir and hadith studies, with keen interest in Islamic epistemology and theosophy. At the Department of Quran and Sunnah Studies, he is also currently the editor-in-chief for the Burhan Journal of Quran and Sunnah Studies. He obtained his bachelor's degree in Hadith Tradition and Islamic Studies from Islamic University in Medina, his doctoral degree at the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS University of London. The researcher is also a member of Islamic Studies Association in United Kingdom and an expert consultant for the government of Malaysia. There's a lot more description about, for the profile of Dr. Hairul, but I just quote a bit. You can look at more detailed profile when you Google Dr. Hairul Husaini. You can find it's more detailed. So I would also like to introduce the other speaker, the next discussant. I would call her my sister. Associate Professor Dr. Mariam Adawiyah Zulkifli. I call her a sister Basil because I always have these insights on cognition and I always share with her, and she's the one who likes to listen to it. Okay, so thank you. And because she is really into cognitive psychology, so she is really qualified to talk about this topic. So Dr. Mariam Adawiyah Zulkifli is an associate professor at the Department of Psychology. Her specialization is cognitive psychology. She studies the role of human cognition in shaping people's behavior. Her main interest is in studying human memories such as the normal and abnormal memory processes, the relationship between memory, aging, and the psychological processes related to memory and learning. She is a member in the Tracer Study Research Group, such as Tracer Study, PCBDG, in KICT, and Auditory Cognitive Group, UKMKL. There are many achievements, but her most recent achievement is being awarded the top 5 researchers in the Kula in Joint projects. She is also currently working on a book entitled Teaching and Learning of Cognitive Psychology from the Western Islamic Perspectives, under the using the grant of Triple IT. Right, Dr. Mara? Okay, to all, if you have any question, please post your question in the chat box and stating Q1, that is question for Dr. Hairil, and question Q2 for Dr. Mariam. All right. Okay, so can I get Dr. Hairil to present?
Also, okay, I'm supposed to respond to question number one.
Okay, so the question is, in your opinion, how well does the framework describe the soul?
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahu wa ba'd. Thank you for the invitation and respected professors and colleagues. I thank everyone for attending this session. First of all, I believe that the intention of inviting me um, is somehow related to the validation of the framework, and I'm not sure whether this framework is going to be adopted for any of the projects in the Department of Psychology, or maybe this framework is one of the many frameworks that a team in psychology is considering for a project. I'm not sure about that, but I have seen a presentation in the Triple IT's workshop on a project. I think Dr. Jamila or some of the members of the Department of Psychology are considering number of frameworks, taking from Al-Ghazali, Abu Zaid al-Balkhi, and the rest of Muslim scholars. So if this is only considering the framework, so I'm not going to be speaking of my own understanding of the structure of soul or the framework of soul, but I'm going to just say how the article of Abdullah Rothman and his co-author, how does that article reflects the Ghazalian framework of soul. So if that is the purpose, then I will say that yeah, despite that the methodology is consulting the participants, and based on what the participants have understood related and the concepts and ideas related to soul, although it comes from the bottom, but it does suit the framework of Ghazalian concept of soul. Um, the four terms that Al-Ghazali described in his book, and he paid attention to these four terms, um, then the authors, they have managed to realign between what they have gathered from the participants and what they have derived from the understanding of the works of Al-Ghazali. If I were to elaborate on that framework, I would say that, if maybe the participants are, from those who are, whose background are perhaps influenced by the distribution of Ghazalian ideas, or maybe they live in a society that, adopt that Ghazalian paradigm of soul. Um, but if we were to perhaps consult other participants, maybe we can see, in a way, this framework somehow, uh, 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 how do I put it, discuss the topic of soul. It seems that it is completely detached from the discussion on the body, or on the jasad, or on the jasmani part, because you can't have the enhancement of soul without considering the enhancement and the maintenance of the body. So I mean, we all know that nowadays people are speaking of the body, mind, and spirit, or body, mind, and soul. Despite that, they have somehow reduced the discussion on soul to a very secular perspective. That is another subject, but somehow we can't find any indication or any allusion uh, to the idea of body, and how body is involved in the enhancement of soul. I mean, if this framework is speaking only on uh, and he mentioned the four, the nature, the structure, the stages, and development, then it's fine. I mean, but if we were to consider the body as well, and the intellectual side of soul, then something in the development of soul is missing there. The maintenance of the body, the confidence that one will have while, maintaining the physical fitness, and also the intellectual part. Uh, I think if we were to delve into Ghazalian works, we will find that the recognition of dunya is part of also the development of soul. You can't develop the soul without recognizing the dunya, that is part of the purpose of creation. We are created and placed here in order to recognize the dunya, and through this dunya we will understand our soul. That is somehow it is not there, because the paradigm of I mean the stages that he mentioned there, the apa amarah and lawamah and mutmainah, it is fine. When most of the scholars, they agreed on that. I mean, I have tried to trace the origin of this who was the first to allude to this amarah, lawamah, and mutmainnah, because it's I mean a culture, or a norms in hadith study. You want to find the first one to spoke about these stages. I couldn't find it, but I found in in Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina in Shifa, he pointed out this amarah, lawamah, and also mutmainah. So in a way, it confirms that Al-Ghazali was also, in a way, Avicennan. And this is what I've also learned from Prof. Yahya Misho. Yahya Misho is an expert in Ibn Sina. He was also the supervisor of Professor the Afifi. And he told me, myself, what what he did to Dr. Afifi Al-Akiti when Afifi want to study Ghazali. Then he said, read Ibn Sina. If you really want to understand Ghazali, then you have to read Ibn Sina first. And Afifi was saying, what is the connection between Ibn Sina and Ghazali? And coming from the Pondok tradition, Ibn Sina is like a kafir, because some of the enthusiasts of Al-Ghazali would see Ibn Sina as, someone who has committed apostasy, or heresy, and but when he read Ibn Sina, he found that, yeah, Al-Ghazali was in a way Avicennan, in a way influenced by Avicenna. So that is the earliest that I can find. I wanted to trace it back to maybe the earlier, but I can find the indication towards this vegetative self, the haiwan, the apa tu, uh, the vegetative soul self, the animal self, and the rational self. I can find an indication in the work of Al-Jahiz. That is the early Mu'tazilite thinker. So that I think um, now the recognition of dunya is important, and I think in a way when we recognize dunya, we will become more creative, and that is part of um, solving problems. Because sometimes we have problems and we do not know how to deal with mental issues, how to deal with depression, anxiety. But when we have more ideas deriving from our experience of knowing more about the dunya, knowing more about this world, then it is easier for us to find a solution. So it's not only the conventional way of solving problem, but we need also that creative way of solving problem, and that creative way can only be developed when we recognize the dunya. So in a way, there is a framework of recognizing self, recognizing God, recognizing dunya, and recognizing shaitan, the four that we need to do in order to understand the enhancement of soul. That is also part of the Ghazalian framework. I think we can find it in the Ghazalian framework. So that is, I think, my comment on how well this article has represented the Ghazalian framework. Okay, but that is not my own personal understanding of soul or my own concept of soul. Then because I'm now responding to the question. So if you were to ask me of my own understanding of the soul, then we will need another session perhaps to discuss of the idea of the soul deriving from many of the Muslim scholars that I have come across during my journey of seeking myself. That is the first comment. Thank you. Sorry if I've taken too much time.
Oh, okay, it's okay. Right, can we just briefly tell about the components of the soul? Yeah.
Sorry?
Briefly tell about the components of the soul. I know you have explained more, just to have a basic information to the other people.
Is that a question for me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if you were to ask me about the components of, um, I would say the components of man, or insan, and not man as in the gender, but man as a person. So in my understanding, we are made of three components, not four, as in the framework. So we are jasad, and the self, and the soul. Jasad, and the self, and the soul. As some people would say, body, mind, and spirit. But there is perhaps, I mean, we will be confused with the terminologies. But I'm going to now restrict myself to the jasad and the self, which is in Arabic, nafs, and also the soul. And the soul in Arabic is the ruh. And when you look for the idea of ruh, meaning of ruh in the Quran, you find that, they are يسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي. So ruh is from the amr of Allah. And scholars of tafsir, they have a different understanding of the interpretation of that ayat. But basically, we can say, in general, there are two major mazhabs. One would say that body and self, and ruh is synonymous to self. So I think that is why we can see in the article, he said that soul is represented by self as well. In the article, he said purification of self, not soul, and also, but he said that the participants are speaking of soul, but they use the term self. I think because some scholars, they have equated soul with self. Ruh is also self. But there is another major mazhab that says like ruh is something else. This is the third component. And I agree with this madhab that say that we are jasad, self, and ruh. And the knowledge of ruh is somehow um, can be attained by people of higher level. Maybe we can say friends of Allah, and also the Arifun or the Gnostics. This is according to the Sufi scheme. Okay, so the Gnostics and the friends of Allah, they will be given the knowledge of the soul. But people who are in the level of self, okay, or who can only understand through the self, they can have a glimpse of that information or that knowledge about Ruh through the enhancement of self. So to the increasement of knowledge in self, they can have that glimpse of information or ma'rifah about Ruh. But in order to really arrive at the knowledge of Ruh, from the Sufi perspective, that you have to go beyond the self, go beyond the akal, in order to arrive at the akal of Ruh. So to conclude, I say that there are two major school of thought. One would say that the Ruh is synonymous to self. And sometimes when you read works, they will say like the purification of soul is also the purification of self. And when they speak of nafsul amara, nafsul mu'ayyanah is similar to the movement of Ruh. But the other school, particularly the theosophical school, not theology and not philosophy, they are like combining between theology and philosophy. The theosophical school, and sometimes they are considered like sesat lah dan sebagainya lah. But the theosophical school would say that there is this third part, that is Ruh, and the knowledge is Ruh. There are differences among them as well. Whether the knowledge about Ruh is possible or not. One school, inside the school, one school of thought would say that knowledge of Ruh is impossible, is the knowledge of Allah. You will be given only min al-ilmi illa qalila, only a bit of that knowledge. The other school say that no, it is possible. You can actually arrive at the knowledge of Ruh via unveiling, via theophany, kashaf, ilham, and all these subjects of Sufism. Okay, so, but I think that will conclude it generally. If we were to go to details, then that we will need too much elaboration on that.
Okay. It's interesting that you just mentioned more about ruh, nafs, but you didn't mention much about the qalb and akal as described. Okay. All right. I think we can I go to Dr. Mariam? Just can you comment? What's your comment on this?
Is it possible for me to go after Dr. Khairil, because I have actually a bit different approach, okay, to the article. So perhaps it's good if Dr. Khairil can continue his discussion, okay, and then I will then share my slides, because I will not be not to say entertaining. I would not go question by question. So I have some sort of like a bit different approach, if that is allowed.
Okay, no problem. All right, so we go to the second question, Dr. Khairil. Okay, so can you explain further how does it explain the way we govern our behaviors? Because I think in the framework, behaviors, I think it's everywhere. But when we talk about behavior, it's just one output from a person. All right, so how does the framework explain? How we do our behaviors.
Okay, I think, okay, first of all, I will need to how to re-emphasize that there are like two approaches here, if I can say approaches. One is my comment on the article. The other is my own conceptualization of man. Okay? So the second comment that I said earlier was concerning my own understanding of the composition of man. So if let's say we go back to the article and look at how can we govern our behaviors through the framework that was developed in the article, I think yeah, it is completely perhaps maybe we can say from the iman perspective, from the completely religious, because the moment only in when you accept that you need that jihad nafs, you need that tazkiyat nafs as mentioned in the article, then you will need to somehow observe your behavior. So first, one will need to accept that part, that discussion. Okay. So that is a very how do I put it, iman or religious, or some would say like fideist approach. Um, there's no like mention of the scientific paradigm there. What I mean by scientific mean the completely empiric and secular scientific paradigm. In the set, maybe in the mazhab of those how do I put it? No, like some of our behaviors are uh, the product of some chemical reactions in our body. So that is completely, bodily understanding of behaviors, or can we say, well, we may say like the physics of human behavior. So that is not there in the article. So if we were to combine all the paradigms, and as I've said earlier, if we look at the three components, the body and the self and also the ruh, then we will know that behavior are affected either by our physical condition or by our mental condition, like in the self part, and also by our ruh condition. But the ruh condition is very difficult to discuss now because it is somehow we will need to go into the Sufi discussion in order to really discuss that. But we can say that if we accept that, then it is easier to understand perhaps like mental illness. Okay, is perhaps you know s- the illness or the disease or the disturbance that occurred because of the chemical reaction in the body or physical unfitness. Because some people would say that when some of the patients came to them and say, oh, I'm feeling this, I'm experiencing this, and you say that, oh, it's because your mental state. It's not necessarily because of your mental state, because some would say that it is because of the some of the chemical reaction and you have to take the medicine. But okay, so we will, if we were to balance between the perspective, we'll say that it involves all the three, or from the first school of thought, it involves both the body and the self. And if we were to agree with the third school of thought, we say it involves the the three components: the body components, the mental components, the self components, and also the ruh component. Um, so it depends on which school of thought we are going to follow. If we say, let's say that we escape the Sufi. We say like, okay, the body and the mental state. So we will need to incorporate both. That body motion in the body can affect our behavior, and emotion in the self can affect our behavior as well. So we have the motion in the body. Motion means I'm using motion as in the chemical movements in the body, uh, like the hardware, like the hardware of the computer, and also the emotion, like the software in the computer. So both can affect our behaviors. So I think the body part is missing from the article. And just to add from the third perspective of formally the another school of thought where it includes the ruh, then the motion of the body, the emotion of the self, and the ruh is like I coined this term like emotion without any motion. So that is the state of fana, fana stillness without any motion. He completely lose himself. That is what the Sufi has been speaking of, the you know not seeing himself, not seeing others, not seeing even not seeing fana ul fana. That is very complicated, but that
Okay.
is not beyond the motion. We'll say so that also will affect behavior uh, from the other school of thought. But if we were not to accept that school of thought, saying that oh maybe this is too complicated or this is not in the Quran or Sunnah or something, so we just come back to the first school of thought saying that okay, it's only the body and also the emotion, both can affect behavior, and emotion will need like um, the 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 feeding knowledge, science, experience, all of this. So all this will affect behavior, and also the body motion in the body also will affect behavior. That is what I understood from behavior, and I think that is a more complicated concept of behavior. Maybe uh, my colleagues are more like specialized in the theory of behavior, but this is only what I understood from behavior as I read through, I mean, as a non-specialist in psychology. So that is my comment on how well the framework in the article can uh, guide us in discussing behavior.
Okay, because you did mention about iman. How does it interlink between the components of the soul, the nerves, all that? What's how do you fit iman in this sort of formula?
Oh, okay. How to fit iman? Okay. Um, because I mean now based on the article, um, the idea of what jihadun nafs or tazkiyatun nafs and what else what he mentioned tadhibul akhlaq, these are all based on the aim of the soul, where we can say also the maqasid of the soul or maqasid of the self. Okay, I'm not sure, maybe in psychology you have as well in the maqasids of psychology, what are the aims of psychology. So maqasid of the soul, maqasid of self, the scholars they spoke of these three stages. The end is to arrive at the nafsul mutmainnah. So only if you believe in these stages that you have the end, and that the end you have to be at the state of mutmainnah in order to achieve at the everlasting happiness, the eternal happiness, then you will follow that scheme. If you don't believe in the akhirah, in the hereafter, in the eternal happiness, then there's no need to enhance the soul, except from another philosophy or moral philosophy. I mean, maybe some people have developed like completely secular moral philosophy, but from the Islamic perspective, it is because of the iman that we have our moral ground, that we need to enhance ourselves. We need to move through these stages. That is because of that. Without the iman, then what is the significance of struggling, of jihad, of tahzibul akhlaq? Then why we have to do that? It is we can only enjoy this world. There's no need for being sabar, or there's no need for being tawadu'. Okay, no need for not quarreling with others. There's no need for that if we don't see that there is something behind the veil, behind what we can see in the realm of the naked eyes. So that is where iman is at the core of the movement of soul, the 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 the, the reason the reason d'etre of this discussion on the journey of the soul. Otherwise, there is no need for the soul, and even the soul itself, the concept of soul itself, is contestable. And I've read once a book by an atheist, The Fallacy of the Soul, that the concept of soul is actually a fallacy. Yeah, that it is we created it in order to deceive ourselves. So when you do not have iman, then there is no need for the soul, except as I've said, and maybe in some later development of moral philosophy, you can find some philosophers who are able to really put that moral ground in according to their philosophy. But as far as what we have seen from the Muslim scholars, iman is at the very heart of the journey of the soul. Without the iman, then there's no need for the journey. You just enjoy this world. There's no need for a journey and the terminal and the station and everything at the end of the journey.
Okay. Right. Thank you. I think we can proceed to the next one. Okay. How can this framework act as a framework for mental health? Right. I think because what you said just now, this thing is very applicable for someone who believes.
Yes.
All right. And so how can it relate in the aspect of mental health? Is it the same that you are iman, a good iman, that you are having good mental health?
I think that is not necessarily. I mean, okay. Let's say that we remove the Muslim scholars from the picture. We just take the very secular perspectives of mental health. So we will have like two, I think. I'm not sure if I've mistaken, then please correct me. There are two major schools of thought. One would say that man is only a body, mind is a machine. There is this like I think a volume on a book with that title, Mind as Machine, and it discuss many concepts of mind. Okay, so there's this one school that take mind as a machine. So mental health, mental diseases, illness is part of the corruption of the machine. So you need just to look at the hardware, where to repair it. Okay, find some medication, repair it, and I think one of the attempts to arrive at knowledge of the machine is this what do you call it? The research on these psychoactive pills, trying to use some medication to go beyond what we have experienced in the normal way. So there is this one school of thought that take mind as a machine and man as a robot, and there is the other way that takes self and emotion into consideration. And within this school of thought, I think they have also differed on whether mental illness is due to the corruption in the physical well-being or due to the state of the mind. And we have uh, I think trends nowadays. I mean, from an outsider perspective, on an outsider, I can see that both trends are prevalent in social media, in news today. One will say that no, just go for the medication, and others say that you need that kind of interference, psychological interference, and counseling and everything. Now we take back the Muslim scholars and bring them into the picture. I think amongst the Muslim scholars, there are those who, without realizing, are inclining towards the first school, looking at mental illness as only the problem of the physical body. And there is another that will look at the mental illness as the problem of the mental state. And they say that, oh, because they equate soul with self, so the mental state is somehow affected by the iman or the ruh, or the intimacy of the person with God. So they say that you need to recite Quran, you need to do zikir. Whereas the person, if we accept the first school of thought, the person may have experienced the mental illness due to some sort of um, imbalance in the physical chemical reactions in the body. So how do we know which one or what is the reason for the mental illness? I think that this is where we need the combination of scholars who specialize in the concepts of self and soul and body, and also scholars who can express it in the scientific language. And I mean the psychologists or scholars of psychology who can express it in the modern language of science, using the language that people nowadays can understand it. Because if we were to use the language that we find in the Torah, in the Kitab Torah, language in the books of Ghazali, perhaps some will not understand it, because the language gap, Arabic and the modern language. And also we will need to go through some of the trainings, Quran, Hadith, Takhrij, and Tafsir, everything, in order to arrive at what Al-Ghazali and what Ibn Sina are speaking about. So now, if I were to bring the third one, that says soul is not self. Okay, so we have the body, the soul, and the self. The mental state could be affected by either one of these three. Affected perhaps by the body, or perhaps by the self, or perhaps by the soul. Okay, if we were to look at the argument of those who defend the soul as another part, and they say the hadith that when a person draws closer and closer to God via obligatory prayers and also supererogatory sunat, everything, until he loves Allah and Allah loves him, and Allah becomes his sight, Allah becomes his hands, Allah becomes his ears or something. Okay, so that in that level, behavior or mental illness is something different from behavior and mental illness at the lower level. But that is why I say that we don't want to go to that level, because it's too complicated now to discuss that level. But we have to accept that the body has somehow an influence. The motion in the body has somehow an influence on the mental health. Combining it with our understanding of the mental state, or the emotion in the self. So if we combine both, I think we have that perhaps the moderate perspective of mental health. It's not always going for medication, and not always going for the enhancement of the mental state, but the therapists would need to be grounded in the knowledge of body, self, and soul, and try to do ijtihad in the language of scholars of Islamic revelation. When he deal with the patient, then he has to do the ijtihad. Otherwise, you will need to use machine to diagnose the person. Or without the machine, do the ijtihad lah. And that is, I think, the scales, the measures, apa yang index and everything they come into the picture, where you develop the measurement, the scales, the tools for that they come into the picture, and they are all part of our ijtihad. And hopefully we will be rewarded if we are correct in our ijtihad, and also rewarded, but not twice, if we are wrong in our ijtihad.
Okay. I think I will hold on. Maybe can I get Dr. Mariam to present your ideas relating to the all the questions?
Is it possible for me to share my slides?
Yes, can you share your screen? Are you along?
Can you see my slides on your screen?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillah rabbil alamin, wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. My respected head of the department, Dr. Jus, my colleagues from the Department of Psychology, Dr. Khairul Hussaini from Department of Quran and Sunnah, my other colleagues from the Kuliah, as well as students. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Intan as the chairperson for the Islamization Committee at the department for the invitation to this sharing session. Okay, so I regard this as basically a sharing session because I have to be honest that I am totally nobody to this framework. Okay, it just happened when I think months ago, while I was preparing my draft for the department's book project, I happened to read this article. Okay, this is one of my main reference for the draft that I am writing. I still owe the department that manuscript, that book chapter. And the model really attract my attention, and I just snapped the model and then share it with Dr. Intan. Okay, so I am in a consistent discussion with Dr. Intan because we share similar interests. So I just snapped the photo of the model and then sent it to Dr. Intan. And I just wrote to her a simple message. Okay, and I still remember I wrote to her, this should be in our curriculum. Okay, and then it stopped. Okay, as usual. Okay, sometimes we are doing something and then we are so occupied with so many other things, so we put aside. So once in a while, we discuss about the ideas. Okay, and a few weeks ago, Dr. Intan invited me to this invitation. And basically, I accepted the invitation simply because I thought that it is only for departmental members. Okay, but then I think what I will be sharing is mainly based on my limited knowledge, based on my limited experience. Okay, and I will be sharing and I will be relating the framework to basically my experience as a student who study psychology here in IIUM in the 90s. Okay, and then now I am teaching psychology at the department. So I am totally not in a position to analyze the model in detail. Okay, and I am also not in a position to argue for or argue against the model. Okay. So basically, what I will be doing is that to say something about this framework and reflect okay, reflect to us as Muslim psychologists. Okay. And I will also be discussing this in the context of psychology in general, as well as in particular to the area that I specialize in, that is cognitive psychology. So hopefully what I will be discussing, what I will be sharing today can be beneficial to all. And as Dr. Intan clearly said in her introduction, this is not the session to get it answered to questions, okay? And perhaps we are not going to get a concrete answers, but then perhaps, okay, we can take in some points, some ideas, and to become a reminder, okay? A reminder for me as well as my dear colleagues, okay? Right. To start off, the model proposed by Dr. Rothman and his co-author in the article is not the only one, okay, because we have actually existing frameworks for Islamic psychology. And as Dr. Rothman mentioned in the article, he mentioned about one model proposed by the author Kashafi and Haq in 2013, an Islamic psychotherapy model, whereby in that model we can see the four aspects of the soul, the nafs, the qalb, the akal, and ruh, and then how they propose that the four aspects can provide a framework for interventions, with each representing a level of the soul as a relative target point for intervening according to assessments and diagnosis. Okay, I just copied and pasted from his article. So this is just for the purpose of giving some ideas to perhaps our students that the model proposed by Rothman is not the only one. Okay, so currently we also have some existing models for Islamic psychology. It is only that it is not that many. Okay, and another model mentioned by the authors in the article is that a systematic Quranic theory of personality by Abu Raya in 2012. Okay, and again, the discussion on the four aspects of the soul, as well as the three nafs, the three types of nafs. And Abu Raya proposed that the inclusion of these stages is significant in that they impart a dynamic element to the framework and indicate a natural progression of the soul towards the growth. Okay, right. So that will bring us to this model. Okay, so this is actually the model that we are discussing today. Okay, so the model is known as an Islamic model of the soul, okay, proposed by Rothman and Coyle in 2018. This is considered as a data grounded, okay, because it is done or it is proposed on the basis of some data collected, okay, because this is actually an empirical paper. He discussed the methodology, all those things, okay. So the idea, the concepts, okay, the idea for this model come from a data grounded consensual model of the soul from within an Islamic paradigm. Okay, I'm not going to explain, as I said earlier on, I'm not going to analyze in detail the model. I'm not in a position to say exactly on what are in these models, but I would like to highlight a few important concepts. Okay, and I guess these important concepts, they are familiar to many of us. Okay, number one is fitrah. Okay, and then Dr. Rothman also highlighted on the anatomy of the soul, which is the structure of the soul. And I believe that these four are also familiar to many of us. Okay, the concept of ruh, qalb, akal, and nafs. Okay, and you can see in this model, okay, Allah, akhirah, syaitan, dunya, okay, there are two poles here. One is in pink color, and then the top is in bluish. Okay, which means that, which indicates the interaction of these four concepts. Okay, you can also see on the right wing the three types of nafs, as well as on the left wing we can see tahdibul akhlaq, okay, muhlikat, as well as munjiat. Okay, munjiat stands for virtues and muhlikat stands for vices. Okay, right. What is so unique? Okay, the uniqueness of the model. Okay, this again does not come from my point of view, but then I just iterate what have been stated in the article. So the authors claim that their model has a more positive view of human nature. Okay, why? Because it started with discussing soul by relating it closely to the fitrah. Okay, and that the soul has an innately pure and good nature, that is fitrah, and it comes from and is connected to God, but that becomes covered over and forgotten as a natural part of life in the dunya. Okay. And then another important point highlighted in the article is the heart, okay, the qalbun, as the spiritual center of human being. And then the intellect and consciousness are located in the heart rather than in the mind. Okay, and just now Dr. Khairil, I believe, has explained in quite sufficient details on the relationship between all those four concepts. Okay, what made me become attracted to the model, okay, despite all those concepts, okay, I regard myself as still learning. Okay, because for me to be able to really discuss the nature of every concept, what is the rule, what is the core, what is the nafs, okay, and what is the akal. Okay. For me, I regard myself as still learning. Okay, because I like to understand it not at philosophical level, but then since I am a psychologist, so I would like to link all those concepts to the study of human behavior and mental processes. On top of that, what becomes some sort of like attract my attention to this framework is that it is a unique framework grounded in an Islamic paradigm. Okay, so the phrase grounded in an Islamic paradigm really caught my attention. Okay, the reason is because I think all this while, I think for us, we have come across actually many models, and I feel that I thought based on my experience as a student. So in the 90s, I can say that the way we study psychology, to be honest, I cannot recall, okay, the idea of how human nature in Islam, okay, because totally we are actually some sort of like we study psychology totally using the way the Western study psychology, okay, and our main reference is the textbook from the Western people, okay, and I think that continue to a certain extent until today, okay. So it means that all this while, okay, we have been teaching, we have been understanding psychology using a framework that is not grounded based on Islamic paradigm. So that is what I feel, okay. And when I read further about, try to understand further about that framework, it reflects or it reminds me to what Allah Yarham Professor Malik Badri, may Allah bless his soul, remind us, okay, wrote in his book published in 1979, The Dilemma of Muslim Psychologists. And he wrote about the Muslim psychologists in the lizard's hole. So it keeps on coming to me that are we still in the hole? Okay, because all this while we have been teaching, for me, when I teach cognitive psychology, I know that I don't start it by giving my students understanding about the nature of human beings according to Islam. Okay, I do not start with that one. But then I start by saying, and in fact, I can actually discuss in detail about information processing approach. Okay? One very dominant approach in cognitive psychology that guide the study of human cognition. And as what Dr. Khairil briefly mentioned just now about the machine, information processing approach as a very dominant paradigm, very dominant framework in cognitive psychology is inspired by the working of the machine. Okay? And then it goes back to my reflection, mashallah, what have I done all this while? Okay, so I question myself. It reminds me to this concept of lizard hole. So what I can reflect is that I do question myself of whether we are still in the lizard holes. Are we still in? Or have we tried to go out? Okay, I think for me, I have tried to go out, but then once in a while, I go back in. Okay, and that is due to certain extent, our obsession. Okay, our obsession with the Western framework. Okay, and the points that I have here, these are all from the articles. Okay, and then you can read further this article, but then I tend to agree on the point that says that it is inappropriate to adopt the theoretical orientations that underpin contemporary Western psychology, because most of these have been influenced by concepts of human nature other than those derived from Islam. Okay? And our theories, our frameworks, our approaches to psychology and psychotherapy will all depend on the extent to which we understand the nature, structure, and development of soul. And the understanding of human nature and the relative conception of structural aspects that make up the human psyche or soul determine much of how we make sense of the behavior and motivation, and are fundamental to the philosophical underpinnings of theoretical approaches to psychology and psychotherapy. Okay, so coming back to the issue of the lizard's hole. Okay, are we in already? Are we still in? Are we trying to go out, but then have to be in again? Okay, so the answer is actually within our own self. Okay, and maybe partly if we were to answer yes to those questions, I believe that we have to go back to why. Okay, just like when I mentioned just now, for me, yes, okay, I was in the lizard hole. I have tried myself to get up from the hole, but then once in a while, I go back to the hole. Okay, and then I try to analyze why I have to keep on coming back to the hole. Okay, why I just cannot leave the hole totally. Okay, so is it because of our ego? Is it because of our ignorance? Or is it because of our denial? Okay, we are all Muslim psychologists, and we are supposed to be the one, okay, who have this framework. Okay, but then some of us have the attitude of, I don't know much about this. Okay, well, I know it's important, but then, it takes time to understand all this. It's not, I have to admit, it is actually not easy, okay, to read about the nature of the soul. Okay, in fact, I was actually struggling to understand what Dr. Khairil mentioned, because some sort of like too much, okay, too much for us to digest. Okay, so I am a person who's some sort of like, well, I have to take it bit by bit. Okay. So when I reflect this to myself, I come to know that is it because of my ignorance? I tend to ignore it. Okay, whereby this is the most fundamental issues that I have to focus on. Okay, so for me, okay, I'm not saying that that is the best model, but then it can guide us. Okay, for me, this is actually a model of psychology that is based on the paradigm of Tawhid. Okay, so this is the framework grounded in an Islamic paradigm. Okay, so when we study psychology or when we teach psychology to our students, I believe that the most fundamental things to expose our students to is about the nature of human beings. Okay, so the questions of who are we as human beings? How do we understand our nature? How do we conceptualize an individual from within an Islamic paradigm? Okay, I like the idea of, I watched one YouTube video by Dr. Rothman, okay, and I like his explanation of how some of us Muslim psychologists treat the issue of the Islamization of psychology or the issue of Islamization of knowledge. Okay, his analogy is, he said that just consider an old building. Okay, we have an old building, and we would like to make it contemporary. We want to make it modern. We would like to some sort of like say that, oh, I want to make this building an Islamic building. Okay, and what we do is this: we just splash some paints here and there. We paint it with some Quranic verses, some hadith there, and that's it. Okay, so it is just some sort of like cosmetic things. Okay, we renovate the old building by splashing some academic, some Islamic points or some Islamic colors on that one, and that's it. Okay, whereby the idea of Islamization of psychology is not just at that surface level. Okay, and all this while, I think that is the analogy. Okay, that is what we have been doing. Okay, well, I'm not saying that all of us, but for me, yes. Okay, and as long as I have Quranic verses, I have hadith to support this concept, that concept, I feel safe. Okay, and all this while I've been doing that one. Okay, but then I think it's now the time for us to move further, to really get the essence of how to develop, okay, how to design our own framework. And this framework, okay, whether we want to borrow, whether we want to adapt, should be based, should be grounded in an Islamic paradigm. Okay, and as I said earlier, okay, when I put a remark to Dr. Intan, okay, at the beginning of our discussion, I really think that this should become, okay, the basis for psychology curriculum. Okay, I think all this while we have produced students, okay, who know more about Sigmund Freud, Skinner, Watson, Chomsky, Bandura, who else? Piaget. Okay, we can continue naming all this. So we have been producing students who are good in explaining all this. But then if we were to question them, the contribution, the concept given by Al-Ghazali, Al-Balkhi, who else? Ibn Sina, okay, just to name a few, I guess they might not be able to elaborate as good as they elaborate the Western scholars. Okay, so that really shows that, well, we perhaps have to some sort of like reorient the way. Okay, and at the department, I happen to lead the committee for the curriculum committee. Okay, so while revising the curriculum, okay, in particular, I'm talking with cognitive psychology, I think that I need to revise, okay, all the topics, okay, that I will put in my cognitive psychology course outline. Okay, all this while, what I've been doing is that I may say a bit, okay, on the Islamic perspective, okay, to cognitive psychology. It is just a kind of touch and go discussion, okay, and to a certain extent, sometimes some of us leave, okay, the discussion or the understanding to the students to read and on their own, okay. So now with the ideas that I have, okay, I feel that to a certain extent, I believe that not only in cognitive psychology, but in many of our courses in psychology, there need to be topics, okay, about the soul, okay, first of all, about the nature of human beings, okay, the physical component, the spiritual component, and from the spiritual component, we are able to elaborate, okay, on the concept of the soul, on the concept of the ruh, the concept of nafs, qalbun, okay, akal. So they need to occupy most of the topics, okay. In Introduction to Psychology, we have to be able to include the topics, and students should be exposed to the Islamic paradigm in understanding behaviors and mental processes from the very beginning, okay. Right. And another point that make myself some sort that really feel that we have to put ourselves back on the track is that if we analyze if we come to know the history of psychology, okay, historically, psychology started as the study of the soul. Okay, so psychology stands for, is a combination of the two words, psyche, which means the soul, as well as logos, which means the study. So basically, psychology started off as the study of the soul. Okay. However, in its growth and development as a scientific discipline, the soul or the mind has been ignored and abandoned. Okay, and there are many factors. So if we study psychology, we know what are the factors that contribute to this one. Okay, so it's actually time for us to revisit all this, to think, and to start to discover and benefit from the truth about human beings, human behaviors, cognition, human societies from the legacy of Islamic knowledge. Okay, and do it according to the paradigm of Tawheed. Okay, I just have this my two last slides, and what I have here is that an extract from my manuscript, okay, for the textbook, teaching cognitive psychology from the Western and Islamic perspective. So I just would like to share what I have written in the book. Okay, in chapter 2, I discuss how to studying cognitive psychology from the Islamic perspective, and I have a section on knowing the what to teach in cognitive psychology. Okay, so I highlighted several important points there, and this closely relate to cognitive psychology, and hopefully this can also relate or can be linked to some other courses also in our curriculum. Okay, as Muslims believe that man consists of a physical and spiritual component. The spiritual component is the essence of man. The discussion on the soul as part of the cognitive processes must be included. Okay. And then down there, I highlighted the idea that any description, explanation, prediction, and control of human behaviors has to be understood by referring to and including this spiritual component of man. And while soul is not accepted as part of contemporary cognitive psychology as its main subject matter, the inclusion of soul in the teaching and learning of cognitive psychology in the Islamic perspective has to be in the foreground. It is therefore highly essential to bring back the study of soul in psychology. And last but not least, it is important, I would like to remind myself, and I would like to call my colleagues at the Department of Psychology to focus back to the study of the mind or soul. And primarily, the content of cognitive psychology should be taught by starting it with a thorough discussion on the nature of the self, the soul, and the connection of the soul to the creator. Okay, because this is actually the fundamental issue to us. This should be the root, okay, for all of us who is studying, teaching, and learning psychology. Okay, I guess that's it, Dr. Intan. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mara, for the so much insights there. So you see, Dr. Haril, how important of it that we understand soul. And I think because the reference is really from the Islamic perspective, I really do see that we need to work really closely because you understand more, your department understands more of the materials related to the soul from the Islamic paradigm. And from the psychology perspective, we want to look at okay, one thing is we cannot ignore the body aspect because it is very critical. So from the psychology point of view, we are investigating that. And so I think the idea is to guide the body so that it is in the right line within the Islamic paradigm, right? So as I said, this is not supposed to be, we don't have, I think we have a lot of questions more. We have some insights. And so I think due to the limited time, all right, I think we have to end now. But we do see that there needs to be ongoing discussion about this matter. And so inshallah, there will be a lot more series. But I welcome questions. I'm not sure. I don't think we have time for the Q&A. Let me see. All right. Because I think some of you will probably have classes. But to just, I think, can we end at this point
We don't
without the
even
Q&A?
without the Q&A. Oh, can we agree on this, Dr. Mariam and Dr. Khairil Hossaini? Is it possible actually for us to sort of like send you some questions so that you can enlighten us more on this, since we are not in the leisure of we don't have the leisure of time actually to proceed with the Q&A. Is it possible?
Uh, okay. The problem is that to respond to written questions and to dedicate times to respond, that will take some time because the nature of our work. We have articles and everything, so speaking is much more easier. But I think it's I mean, I have no problem if we want to have another session in the future. I mean, writing back it will take some time, I would say.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Maybe
But
just a short comment as a conclusion later. Mm. Uh, or can I just conclude here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just I mean, the stage of IIUM is that now I I give more emphasis on the body, and a lecturer in psychology speaking with more emphasis on the soul. That is the strangest of IIUM. I mean, but I think the article does need to incorporate the soul, the body part, because even cult, you have the cult in the body and the cult in the self. Okay? So the apa tu, the heart, jantung tu penting juga, the beats of the heart. So all of that are related to there. So for me, the Quran is about bringing all perspectives together and seeing the limitations of each area or each approach or each perspective, because in each approach or perspective there is a bit of truth. even if we consider man as a machine, there's a bit of truth there, but there is a limitation. So what the Quran does is to bring all of them together and avoid the extreme parts. So that is why I would be uh, more comfortable with de-extremization. It's in the Quran. What an ya'budullah wajtanibu taghut. The vision is to go towards Allah and avoid these extremes. Um, and even de-westernization is sometimes is a bit problematic for me. Sometimes because when you trace some of the ideas in the Western literature, you find that it goes back to the early philosophers like the Platonic and Neoplatonic, and they shared like the same idea with the Muslim scholars. So it's not necessarily what in the West is that is deprived from soul or deprived from spirituality. And I've experienced it myself. I mean, I've frequent some of the spiritual circles in the West, trying to find, is it true that people in the West are not spiritual, are not paying attention to the soul? And sometimes I find it the other way around. Sometimes I have even attended a course on the art and science of dying, how to die, from the perspective of art and science. Oh, very speaking of wasiat and everything. So I mean, we need to always in a discussion and always be open to listen to one another. That is, I think, the way to move forward. Uh, because being too confined to a specialization or area is sometimes it may lead us to a sort of extreme position without realizing that we have gone to that extent. So that is my final comment. I mean, I don't have any problem if we want to have like a specific session on this subject. And I've said earlier, this is my comment on the article, not my own perspective, but I have somehow included my own conceptualization in the discourse. So sorry, and thank you for invitation. Hope to see you all again.
Okay. This a small remarks. Okay. Actually, I'm very much interested in the context of the jasad, because from Ibn Sina point of view, somehow the context of material being and immaterial, where the soul is being described as immaterial, whereby it is very much attached to the material, which is the body. I have that in mind. Actually, I want you to say something, actually, Husaini, on that particular part. Okay, Intan, take it as a promise from Dr. Husaini. We can have another session with him. Okay, thank you so much, Husaini.
Okay. All right. I would welcome questions. You can send to my email so that this can guide me on the next session to be conducted. All right. And I think even if we can get Dr. Khairil, I think we can also get the other lecturers from the Department of Quran Sunnah, because I saw Dr. Junaida was in, Dr. Adi was in, the people that actually tried to ask to join for this discussion. All right. Okay. Dr. Maram, do you have any last words?
I don't have much to say, but as Dr. Khairil has said, okay, I believe that there need to be a consistent discussion, okay, on the issue. It is for the sake of us to learn from each other, okay, and it's good to have members, colleagues from the other departments, because perhaps we can learn from a different perspective. As for us at the department, I believe that to a certain extent we are actually always be in touch with each other, and we are always learning from each other. Okay, so inshallah, I hope that the Islamization Committee of the department will continue to have this kind of sharing session, okay, to benefit all of us. Thank you so much.
Okay, Dr. Jamila, I know you have raised your hand just now. So okay. Okay. Thanks, Dr. Zunaida, for the information. I'll keep you the names. All right. To be invited for the following sessions, upcoming sessions. I think that's all the time that we have for today. I truly even though we actually listen just from the points from two main person, right? And I didn't get the chance for the Q&A, but I think what we have learned is very insightful, and hopefully it gives us more understanding about the soul. Even though it may give us questions, it's okay, because when you have questions, it pushes you to investigate more, right? And so on behalf of the committee, I want to thank everyone for joining the session. May Allah bless all our effort in trying to understand ourselves better, so that we can govern our behavior, and we also can share the knowledge that we have about ourselves with other people, right? Okay, so thank you very much to students. I hope you have benefited, and also you can also continue this discussion with your lecturers, because all of us are working in improving the syllabus, so that it really is in line with the Islamic concepts. So with that, thank you very much. Maybe you can end the session with let me see. Anyone knows how to take photos? Pam, can you do take photo?
Zaid, do we have Zaid?
Zaid.
Zaid.
Zaid, can you
I
take
think
photo?
okay. With that, I would like to request all of the participants to switch on their camera, so that we can have like some memory on our meetings, briefings.
Okay.
Zaid, boleh cakap tak Zaid?
Dah belum, Zaid? Oh. Okay.
Dah ambil? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
so much, Zaid. Okay, thank you. Let's end session with Tasbih Quran. One answer. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum. Until we meet again.
Waalaikumsalam. Hope to see you again, Dr. Khairil.
Thank you so much. All
All
right.
right.
Thank you for
Thank
all
you.
participants, especially students. I'm so glad to see that many of you are here.
Alhamdulillah.
Tadi ada suara drill tu masuk dalam ni tak?
Apa dia?
Suara drill.
Tak ada. Jangan
ada.
risau. tak ada.
Tak ada.
You are clear.
Jiran saya dia renovate rumah dia dari
Oh, ya
pagi
ke?
dia.
Okay.
Okay, baik.
Alright.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Alright, Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Husaini.
Okay, Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Intan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jess and Dr. Maram and Dr. Sen.